On my spare time, I try to save the planet, so, or at least Finland.
You'll never know. Singularities come to you.
Yeah, then we can stop making video games. So.
Yeah, we'll ask for like, can I get like an Uncharted 17? Mikael Haveri, I've been in the industry for 14 years now. Worked at our alumni at Frozen Byte, and now at Housemarque for 10 years. And marketing, branding, non-game essential services. Yeah, so Housemarque was funded, or actually it was a fusion of two companies, Terramark and Bloodhouse, which were both 93 startups, and then 95 they formed the unison that became to be Housemarque. And since then it's been a lot of different offshoots from the demo scene and different smaller type of titles. Remedy was 2 months after Housemarque, so they're very close in those early days. And now we've done a lot of work with PlayStation and of course recently 2 years ago acquired by PlayStation as well. So long journey, 27 years altogether with Housemarque. And for me, I came in of course 10 years ago, but still with the understanding there's a legacy to uphold.
What do you think the company's role has been in kind of creating the ecosystem that we have here today?
Housemarque's been always fundamentally the Finnish, one of the kind of founding partners or hobby scene teams, kind of a ember keeping that flame alive, and that's been part of the underdog story too. We've been a big part of trying to help with the education system that we now have in Finland, which of course wasn't here in the beginning. Doing a lot of work with Neo Games and a lot of the industry sort of extra assets to make sure that a lot of the bases are covered. Laying a lot of foundation work, but then right now we're not as involved as a trendsetter.
What would you say makes the Finnish industry and the Finnish games industry special and unique?
The Finnish industry is weird because we've been always kind of stuck in our quiet little corner of Europe, and we've always had an attitude of how do we get out from this corner? It's not really about battling the local teams for supremacy within this small arena, but it's more like, hey, can you help me help these guys, and can we together learn from our mistakes and then try to take over the world? So I think that was, us against the world. How can we help each other? So a lot of information sharing, a lot of helping out with other companies, sort of integral after work scene, having open communications really adds up. And I think Nokia and other tech type of companies have been an additional factor to it. But the culture itself is very much more of a hobbyist. Let's do stuff together and share information.
When you guys look at the kind of the big picture opportunities and obstacles in games, like what's real? What keeps you up at night?
We've always been building on a stable foundation, and that comes with the years of experience. If you look at, let's say, the PS4 era for Housemarque, we knew what size projects we could take on, when we'd have to sign the funding, approximately even if we ended up going a year over, we kind of had that in the contingency. And from that perspective, I don't think we've been able to over plan or like over scope things to an extent where even if all fails, we would, just start kind of struggling to get something together. The humbled attitude with knowing that, we've had layoffs years back, I think it educates you in a way that you're more realistic with where you want to go. There's always new innovations, VR, AR, MR, all the R's. There's a lot of interesting things. But for example, here, we're just getting into narrative, how some projects can start battling with the movie industry, for example. at Housemarque, it's always been about gameplay first, but that just means that we have a framework of now how do we add the narrative into the gameplay that works still with the gameplay not breaking down. So again, it's a very fundamental thing that allows the game to shine on its own as a starting point. But yeah, it's interesting to look at opportunities and tools like AI and all these things. We're employing 2D artists, and they're the first one to have an impact on their day-to-day. So instead of going all in and saying, hey, let's double down and just get AI everything, we're more like, well, how do you feel about it? Like, do concept artists actually want to integrate those tools? Or if they're really against it, then more about, well, how can we make sure that they have the growth plans and trajectories that they want? So I think the human attitude there still keeps your feet to the ground a little bit more. Overall, I think everybody whose work can be impacted by AI and ML is interested in it, but then there's people who really look into it that maybe don't see it as big of a threat because they see the pitfalls of the technology. But then for anybody who's just wowed by the impressive things that they're able to do, of course it's scary. It should be scary for everybody. It's not a given that the future is sort of aligned in a perfect manner that everybody gets to have their cake and eat it too, And if it does impact your future, then, let's work together to make sure that there's opportunities for everybody to grow and to re-educate. And the thing is, if you compare AI and an actual artist, there's clear win in terms of how much material can a computer produce in a time frame. But then if you compare that to the actual artist, there's a human touch there that just can't be implemented by a computer because it's copy-paste stuff anyway.
Yeah.
So, I mean, but then again, who can see that and who can appreciate it? I think discovery and distribution and sort of digital shelf space is always going to be an issue. Of course, we know the PC and console side a bit better than the mobile side. I would say that PC console digitization of the whole industry has an impact. There's a fully digital console and a disc console version now available of the PS5, which means that just the physical shelf space is also becoming a diminished entity itself. We're very lucky to be in a position where our games are, first party. So that means there's a reserved space for us always, but we still have to earn it. And now, of course, with the awards, we're getting a bit more push to the front, if you will. But it's going to be always a struggle, and I think that that's where the indie innovations can shine. So new, exciting variety, beautiful genres like roguelikes, mixing things that are just fresh. I think that's like the key. If you want your product to stand out, you need to make sure that it's doing something on its own to get the attention. Genre mixing in general is something that we've always had in the industry. It's just when you get stuck in traditional loops that it actually starts to have diminishing returns in terms of let's invest in something really innovative. So I think now we're in a good place again, and I'm hoping for an indie resurgence.
What are the discussions the games industry should start having when it comes to tackling climate change?
So for me, the climate change issue is more about owning our own industry and setting a good example as we do things. For us, it was like we've always recycled. Can we do more? We can always do more. Tech waste, it's a no-brainer. Especially in Finland, we have the really good facilities where you can just take care of that waste. In general, it's more about showing of how we can do things. So traveling as well. Now we can choose to not travel. Sometimes we'll travel, but it's good to maybe downscale that a little bit as well. The excess is something that we have to understand that our image doesn't need to show excess anymore. Maybe at some point there was more ego involved and we needed to show off that we've made this a success. Now everybody should understand that this industry is a success. Nobody needs to show off excess.
Yeah.
From anything, from your suits and ties to cars and travel and locations. Let's more show about the things that we tinker on and the tools and the actual art of the craft. Again, maybe it's something that we could learn as a bigger community. I think in Finland we have a certain view of the games industry, and it's a bit on the posh side still, and we're used to seeing cool excess things. But now we could actually focus more on just, hey, what are the sustainable ways of doing this?
Yeah.
But we're not gonna maybe make a character who's like Captain America or somebody, or just a recycling hero or
Toxic Avenger.
yeah. None of these will hopefully seep too much into it, but then we can be the people, those real life toxic Avengers who actually take on the causes ourselves.
I am Jani Kahrama. I work in this studio called Six Texas, and I'm the amalgamation of CEO, game design, tools programmer, whatever, the indie life. But on my spare time, I try to save the planet, or at least Finland, and that has mostly been the project of Pelimetsä.
Can you tell us more about Pelimetsä? What is it? I mean,
Pelimetsä started as just an idea that the game industry could be doing something good together. I mean, there were news, of course, of different things that it could be doing, and one of them was protection of old forests. And then, of course, that led to the entire planning of, hey, could the Finnish game industry buy forests? Like, should they own their own forests in compensation for their CO2 emissions? And then that leads to enormous complexities again. Like, then you should need the Finnish Game Development Forest Association, who would be responsible for the management of this forest asset. And then if we were an organization managing forest assets, then what would make us any better than the other associations making decisions on like what to preserve and what not? So ultimately, again, following the news, there was a news bit about a forest being donated to a foundation in Finland. The foundation is called the Finnish Natural Heritage Foundation, and their work is in its entirety, it's taking in donations and then protecting old forests and their biodiversity. And the fact that these people are there doing that part of the work made things tremendously easy for us. Like this whole planning of what should we do turned out to be as simple as, hey, let's pool money and make a big donation to this foundation and use that to protect forests. And that's exactly what happened. So I think it was 3 years ago that the first kind of action took place. And this was simply a matter of contacting people around the industry with actually the simple, almost one-liner pitch of, hey, let's donate money and protect old forest. That's all it needed, in fact. So then it was just a matter of getting the word from people to people, seeing who wanted to pitch in. And ultimately, we were able to pull together a donation of roughly 500,000 euros, which was at the time the single largest, or no, not the single largest, but the largest single donation made to the foundation. And that was used to protect 2 forest regions, one in Lapland and one, well, in sort of central Finland as well. And that simple message was really quite enough for many of the people who were contacted, and for the people who wanted to pitch in, the whole idea of, and the simplicity of it was appealing. Like, okay, just money in, forest saved.
Yeah.
And that was essentially it. It was, of course, it took some like word of mouth to get some people's contact information and so forth. But all of this gathering of donations, and even all the donation was ultimately, it was anonymous. It was simply made as a goodwill gesture from the game industry, just to get it done. Like there was no naming of specific companies or individuals who pitched in at all. Everyone appreciated the fact that there was no personal glory to be attached with this. It was just game industry people doing something together. But the next step was to make it official. So the Game Developer Association in Finland adopted the initiative to be their official activity. And then essentially to give the game industry a taste of its own medicine, this became a subscription. So the companies who wish to participate in the Pelimetsä project agreed to become long-term supporters. Let's say that if the original donation accumulation was about 500,000 euros, then the accumulation beyond that is somewhere in the 60, 70,000 euros on top of that. This brings us to the scope of climate change and the fact that the influence and the size of the Finnish game industry means that we could be accomplishing so much more. Like what we've done is a really positive signal in that we can do good things together. But when we talk about the magnitude of work needed to have an actual ecological impact on at least national scale, if not international, then the work needed has to be more than what we've done right now. And that then brings us over to phase 3, which is in development right now. Well, being a Finn, I've always lived among the narrative that Finns have a special relationship with the forests and so forth. And I wish that were so. I think there are people who care about forests, but like on a national level, I think forests here are treated more as a resource than something. Let's not use the word sacred, but still. I mean, let's say that for Sweden, Norway, cultures that are highly similar to us, I think the respect for nature is equal and easily understood. And the further along we go to different countries, like forests are still present and prevalent here on a geographical level. And I don't know how that would be in more like the birthplace of cultures where mankind has had much more influence on the environment there. Like if there are not so many forests remaining, then maybe they're not something that you like. Maybe the sea is more important to some people than the forest. So that may be like whatever is that particular culture's like the mental landscape, like like this is what our country stands for, then maybe support for that cause and the preservation of that which everyone feels is theirs. Maybe that's the angle to use, like geo-locally. Preservation of biodiversity is important anywhere and everywhere.
Yeah.
Equally.
So maybe because you were talking about Sweden, we are going to visit Game Habitat, and they're thinking about protecting forests together as well.
Excellent.
And yeah, like and I was like, I have a really great example. So what do you think? How should they come together and like do it?
Gather the like-minded people, scope out the stakes that everyone is willing to participate with, and then see what you can do with them. Like for us, it was, of course, pleasant that we didn't have to become owners of forest. I don't think that's an ultimately insurmountable issue. Like if the Swedish game developers wish to be the custodians of large swaths of forest, then let them. But however, if Sweden has a similar foundation in place who are active about protection of biodiverse areas, then maybe the exact same model that we have here in Finland would work out for them as well. For Finnish game companies, the fact that you can basically just use money to achieve something good without it tying your resources into something more complex, then finding those simple solutions, I think, is a pragmatic approach.
As far as I can see, the Finnish games industry is very close. People know each other. It's a very close and tight community already.
It helps when everyone knows each other, of course. It was fruitful ground to be doing something together when there's people who know each other. Moreover, there are people who trust each other. And if there was no trust, then none of this would happen. Having trust, having community, and having a nature protecting foundation nearby. One of the most profitable, if the not most profitable industry, should be leading in mitigation of climate change and in the preservation of biodiversity. Like, if not us, then who? Right now, the solutions being discussed here are about the commitment of every single game developer separately to find a solution. For the short term, at least, I think it's almost the only way forward. I mean, we have, if we accept the responsibility as game developers that the carbon emissions of the game devices when they are playing our games are our responsibility, then we should be dealing with that issue. On the flip side, and I know that this is also a controversial opinion, what would happen if the responsibility for carbon emissions was actually a platform level issue? App Store, Google Play, Epic, Steam,
They have all the data.
PlayStation and Xbox. They have the data, they know their devices, and they benefit from about that 30% from every transaction on those platforms. So should they bear more responsibility about the content consumption on their platforms? That's a political level discussion, certainly beyond the means of our project to influence this level of decision making. But I would love to see that future upon us as well.
What do you think about the reach which the games industry has?
Communicating to your users is sort of passing the buck downstream, whereas I'm saying that companies should take care of this and hopefully platforms should take care of this. So, like, it's not really like consumers can pitch in, they should pitch in. This concerns everyone, but the responsibility should always flow upstream, in my opinion. Every old forest cut down is a loss in biodiversity, and the forest may grow back in 60 years, but the life won't. So, yeah, the only way to guarantee biodiversity in its full scope is to preserve the existing forests and let them be undisturbed.